All right, welcome back, guys. We're going to be talking about shutter speed and long exposure photography and really like what shutter speed is. Now, we use this for long exposure photography, which you, as the photographer, would be using to capture motion over time by allowing the shutter to stay open for longer than normal. Now, shutter speed control is the amount of time that the shutter is open. So I brought this, which is an old school lens, right? Like most of you guys will be taking it on DSLRs, right? This right here is the Canon 3.7. This video is very specific, I guess, to the T7 and the T3, but it applies to a lot of the other Canon brands, models, I mean, and pretty much every other camera, because shutter is an important part to photography. It's actually one of the three things with getting a perfect exposure, but we're actually manipulating photos by having the shutter open for much longer. So let's start by showing you what a shutter actually is. You have one in this camera right here, which is the DSLR, but in this old school one, you can actually see very clearly. Let me show you, I guess, this part right here. You can see the blades that make up the shutter. Now, you see them closing, you see it opening, you can kind of see the edges right there of each one of the blades. And the longer that these blades are open, the more things that you're capturing. Like so for example, if you're capturing someone running and you take it at a much faster shutter speed, there's not much difference. You've captured something in motion, right? But if you decide to take it like this, much slower, you're gonna see the blurred lines of that person. Maybe you'll still see a little bit of the person in perfect focus depending on what speed you take it, but that's how you actually take long exposure photography. You open up your shutter for a little bit longer than normal. So let's go into it specifically for what we're doing. We're doing long exposure photography. Now I'm going to show you three different photos that I took right here on this desk. This one over here on the left, it's a much slower shutter speed. Now it's 0.6 of a second, which is pretty slow. And you can see I was zooming in actually. As I was doing this, I zoomed in 0.6 of a second. So from one all the way in as I was zooming, and 0.6 seconds later, I get this, right? Which is not that long, but when it comes to shutter speed, it's a little bit slow. So I was able to zoom in and get that kind of effect that something is zooming in. Even though it's not a live picture that's in motion or a video, you can see the motion that I was doing. Now I was doing the same motion with this other one right here, but the speed was a little bit different. This is 1/4 of a second, and 1/4 of a second is a little bit faster than 0.6 of a second. So you could see that the ampersand itself is perfectly in focus, but you can see the effect as well. So you see not as much of an effect as the one on the left, but the one on the middle has a little bit of that effect, but it has more of the focus on the image itself. Now the one to the right is 1/15, which is faster than 1/4. So you could see the difference faster. Even though I was zooming in on the one on the right, you can still see that it doesn't show the real effect as much, maybe a little bit because it looks blurry, or maybe that was just me moving it, but you can see that there's a difference with how long you keep it open. Now, the reason I started thinking about this video was because on a Canon camera, when you put it on the TV mode, right, you turn it on, and then you turn on your camera, these numbers over here can be a little bit, I guess, unsettling. Like right here it says 30 and then it has quotation marks over it, and you might be asking like, well, what does that actually mean? And as you're looking at it, you could rotate it to the right, and that's the little function button right here. You could rotate that wheel, and you could rotate it all the way to 1/4 thousandths, right? Your camera might actually go a little bit higher than that. But 1/4 thousandths, and again, you might be thinking, what's 1/4 thousandths? 1/4 thousandths is 1/4 thousandths of a second. It's a fraction of a second, a small fraction of a second. And 30, with the quotation mark after that, is actually 30 seconds. So all the way to the left is the slowest speed that you could put. All the way to the right is the fastest speed you should put. But that still may not mean anything to most people. So let me show you guys this part. I just wrote down the different shutter speeds, at least on the T7 and the T3. You can see it goes from 1/4000th right here all the way down to 30 seconds. And you can see what it equals. So anything with quotation marks after it, that's how many seconds it is. So 10 seconds, right? 8 seconds, 4 seconds. Now this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. People are like, well, what does that mean then? It means 3 seconds and 0.2. So 3.2 of a second. So 3 seconds and 0.2 seconds, right? You can see the different increments right here. Now, when it comes to fractions, like you see 1/4, we all know, like, well, most of us know that 1/4 of a second is 0.25. Just like with money, it's a quarter. You have 4 quarters and $1, but the fractions do get a little bit more complicated. So to figure that out, the fractions, you could solve them by dividing the first number and the second number. So for example, 1/4000 equals 0.002. And the way that we know how to do that, you could go down and get your calculator. You could divide 1 divided by 4,000. 0.0025, right? I took the last number off of it. I just did like the first 4 numbers, right? And some of them I just did the first 3 numbers. But you can see by dividing the first number, which is usually a 1, divided by that number, you could get how many seconds it is. And you might be thinking, well, why is this important? The reason it's important because as a photographer, you want to control as much of your image as possible. The aperture, the focus, the shutter speed is just one of those things. And the more that you understand about shutter speed, the more you could understand and create these great pictures that are produced by keeping your shutter open for much longer. I hope this helps. I hope you're able to take great pictures with this and enjoy.